The sound of ripping paper echoed through the marble-floored bank lobby. Everyone froze. Marcus Johnson stood there, trembling hands holding the torn pieces of a check for $10 million, tears streaming down his weathered face. The bank manager who had just laughed in his face now stared in horror. No one knew that this moment of humiliation would become the turning point that would transform not just Marcus's life, but an entire community. If you've ever felt like the world was against you, if you've ever been judged for your appearance rather than your character, this story will touch your heart. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that remind us of the power of human dignity and second chances. Marcus Johnson pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his thin frame as he walked through the imposing glass doors of First National Bank. The early morning February air had chilled him to the bone during his 2-mile walk from the small apartment he shared with his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. His ancient pickup truck had finally given up the ghost 3 weeks ago, another burden added to the mountain of challenges he faced daily. At 38, Marcus looked a decade older. Life had not been kind since his wife Sarah's death from cancer 3 years ago. The medical bills had drained their modest savings, forcing him to sell their small house and move into a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood he would never have chosen for raising his daughter. He worked 2 jobs, days as a janitor at the local high school and evenings at a warehouse, just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Today was his rare day off, and he had promised Lily they would visit the zoo after he completed an errand. The errand that now had him standing nervously in line at the bank, clutching an envelope containing what had to be some kind of mistake. 3 days ago, it had arrived in the mail. A certified letter and a check made out to Marcus Johnson for $10 million. The letter, on expensive letterhead from a prestigious law firm, explained that an anonymous benefactor had selected him as the recipient of this life-changing gift. No strings attached. No explanation given. Marcus had spent 2 sleepless nights staring at the check, convinced it was an elaborate scam. But the law firm was real, he had looked them up. The letter contained details about his life that weren't public knowledge. And something in his gut told him this impossible thing might actually be real. The line moved forward, and Marcus found himself facing a young teller with perfectly styled hair and a crisp white shirt. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes as she took in his appearance, the worn jeans, the faded flannel shirt with a small tear at the elbow, the scuffed work boots. I'd like to deposit this check," Marcus said quietly, sliding the envelope across the counter. The teller opened it, and her eyes widened. She looked at Marcus, then back at the check, then at Marcus again. Without another word, she pressed a button beneath her counter. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, his heart sinking. "Sir, I need to get my manager. Please wait a moment." Marcus stood awkwardly as other customers in line began to murmur behind him. He could feel their stares, their judgment. The familiar feeling of shame crept up his neck, the same shame he felt when he had to tell Lily they couldn't afford new shoes yet, or when he had to ask his neighbor to watch her because he couldn't miss a shift at the warehouse. The bank manager appeared, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and an expensive suit. He took the check from the teller and examined it with narrowed eyes. "Mr. Johnson, is it? Would you mind stepping over to my office?" His tone was polite but cold. Marcus followed him to a glass-walled office, aware of the curious glances from other customers and employees. The manager closed the door and gestured to a chair, but remained standing himself. "Mr. Johnson, can you explain where you got this check?" Marcus swallowed hard. "It came in the mail. From Harrington, Weiss, and Mitchell. They said an anonymous donor." The manager's laugh cut him off. It wasn't a kind laugh. "An anonymous donor sent you, specifically, $10 million? Through the mail? I know how it sounds, but—" "Mr. Johnson," the manager leaned forward, placing both hands on his desk, "do you know how many scams like this we see? People like you come in here all the time with fraudulent checks, hoping we'll deposit them and release some funds before we discover they're fake. People like me? Marcus felt a flush of anger beneath his embarrassment. Let's be honest here. The manager's voice dropped to a condescending whisper. Look at yourself. Do you really think someone would give $10 million to a man who can't even afford a decent shirt? This check is obviously fake, and attempting to deposit it could be considered fraud. Marcus sat very still, the manager's words cutting deeper than any physical wound could. In that moment, all the indignities of the past 3 years, the pitying looks from Lily's teachers, the dismissive treatment from Sarah's doctors when he struggled to pay the bills, the landlord who spoke to him like he was stupid, all of it crystallized into a single, burning point of humiliation. With trembling hands, he reached for the check. The manager smirked, clearly believing Marcus was admitting defeat. Instead, Marcus stood up, looked the manager directly in the eye, and slowly, deliberately tore the check in half. Then in quarters. Then in eighths. People like me, Marcus said quietly, don't need your judgment or your approval. He dropped the pieces on the manager's immaculate desk and walked out, past the staring tellers, past the line of customers, and into the cold morning air. Only when he was outside did he realize what he had done. $10 million, real or not, torn to pieces in a moment of wounded pride. He leaned against the building's stone facade, fighting back tears. What would he tell Lily? That daddy had thrown away what might have been their chance at a better life because someone had hurt his feelings? As he stood there, trying to compose himself, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and an elderly man with kind eyes and a tailored suit stepped out, leaning heavily on a polished wooden cane. Mr. Johnson? Marcus Johnson, the man asked, his voice gentle but commanding. Marcus straightened, wiping quickly at his eyes. Yes? My name is Edward Harrington. Of Harrington, Weiss, and Mitchell. I believe we need to talk. Edward Harrington led Marcus to a small cafe across from the bank. Despite his age, Marcus guessed he was well into his 80s. The lawyer moved with purpose, ordering coffee for them both before settling into a corner booth. I was watching, Edward said simply, stirring a single sugar into his coffee. I saw what happened in there. Marcus stared down at his untouched cup. You saw me tear up $10 million. Yes. Edward's eyes crinkled at the corners. And that's exactly why my client was right about you. Marcus looked up, confused. I don't understand. The check was real, Mr. Johnson. Every penny of it. And my client, who wishes to remain anonymous, specifically instructed me to observe how you handled it. They said, and I quote, a man's true character is revealed not by what he does when he has everything, but by what he does when he has nothing. So this was some kind of test. Marcus felt a fresh wave of anger. Playing games with people's lives for entertainment? Edward shook his head firmly. Not a game. My client has been watching you for some time. They know about your wife's passing, about your struggle to raise Lily alone, about the 2 jobs you work without complaint. They know you gave up your education to care for your sick mother 20 years ago, and that you've never once asked for handouts despite your circumstances. Marcus sat back, unsettled by how much this stranger knew about his life. When that bank manager humiliated you, Edward continued, you could have argued, made a scene, or simply slunk away in shame. Instead, you stood up for your dignity, even at great personal cost. That told my client everything they needed to know. Edward reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card and a small envelope. This is not a check. It's the deed to a property and access information for a trust fund. $10 million, as promised, but structured in a way that no bank can deny. The property is a house, 4 bedrooms, good neighborhood, excellent school district. The trust pays out a monthly stipend and covers educational expenses for both you and Lily. Marcus stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. Why? Why me? Edward's expression softened. My client was once in your position, alone, struggling, judged by appearances rather than character. Someone gave them a chance when no one else would. They've spent the last 40 years looking for the right person to continue that legacy. Today, they found him. With shaking hands, Marcus accepted the envelope. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. But my client does have one condition." Edward leaned forward. "When you're on your feet, when Lily is grown and secure, they ask that you find someone else who deserves a chance. Not $10 million, it doesn't have to be money at all. Just a chance, whatever that means to you." Marcus nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I can do that." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of his new home, watching through the window as Lily played in the backyard with her new puppy. The house was everything Edward had promised, spacious, in a safe neighborhood, with Lily's school just 3 blocks away. The trust provided enough for them to live comfortably, with Marcus taking classes at the local community college to finish the education he'd abandoned decades ago. But the most profound change wasn't in their material circumstances. It was in the weight that had lifted from Marcus's shoulders, the constant grinding anxiety that had been his companion for so long. For the first time since Sarah's death, he could breathe. He could plan. He could hope. He thought often of the anonymous benefactor, wondering who they were and if they knew how completely they had transformed his and Lily's lives. He thought, too, about the promise he had made, to pass on the chance he'd been given. He didn't wait until Lily was grown to begin fulfilling that promise. It started small, hiring a single mother from his old neighborhood to clean the house once a week, paying her twice the going rate. Anonymously covering the repair costs for his former neighbor's car. Establishing a scholarship at Lily's school for children who had lost a parent. As the months turned into years, Marcus's efforts grew. He used his business degree to start a small company that specifically hired people who struggled to find employment elsewhere, former inmates, recovering addicts, those without formal education but with a willingness to work hard and learn. He remembered what it felt like to be judged by appearances, to be dismissed without being known, and he built a company that looked deeper. On Lily's 16th birthday, 9 years after that day in the bank, Marcus finally told her the full story of the torn check and the second chance that followed. They sat together on the porch swing of their home, the same home they'd moved into all those years ago, though now filled with memories and laughter. "So you never found out who gave you the money?" Lily asked, leaning her head against her father's shoulder. Marcus shook his head. Edward Harrington passed away 3 years ago, and he never revealed his client's identity. But in a way, I'm glad. It wasn't about gratitude or recognition. It was about seeing value in someone that others had overlooked. Lily was quiet for a moment. "Like you do with your company." "Exactly like that." Marcus smiled. "Every time I hire someone who just needs a chance, every time I see them succeed and rebuild their life, I feel like I'm honoring the gift I was given." "Do you ever think about that bank manager? The one who humiliated you?" Marcus chuckled. "Funny you should ask. His name was Richard Dawson. About 5 years ago, the bank went through a merger, and he lost his job. Couldn't find another position at his level, too old, they said, though he was younger than I am now. What happened to him? He applied to work at my company. Didn't recognize me at first, I guess I've changed a bit since then." Marcus ran a hand over his now silver hair. "When he realized who I was, he tried to withdraw his application. He was so ashamed he could barely look me in the eye." "Did you hire him?" Lily asked, though her knowing smile suggested she already guessed the answer. "I did. He works in our accounting department now. Good at his job, once he got past his embarrassment. His wife sent me a thank you card last Christmas, said I'd saved his life by giving him a chance when no one else would." Marcus shook his head at the irony. "I never told him that he was part of the reason I built the company in the first place." As the sun set over their neighborhood, casting long golden shadows across the lawn, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of despair to a life of purpose and meaning. From being judged to being the one who suspended judgment. From receiving a chance to giving chances. The torn check, that moment of humiliation and defiance, had indeed changed everything. Not because of the money that eventually came, but because it had revealed to Marcus a truth he might otherwise never have discovered, that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in dignity. In the courage to stand tall even when the world tried to diminish you. In the power to transform not just your own life, but the lives of others. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, Marcus made a silent promise to his unknown benefactor, wherever they might be. The legacy would continue. The chain of chances would remain unbroken. And somewhere, someone else who stood where he once stood, alone, struggling, judged by appearances rather than character, would find their life transformed by an opportunity freely given, with no expectation beyond the hope that they, too, would someday do the same for another. In the end, that was the true gift, not the millions of dollars, but the millions of possibilities that opened up when one person chose to see the value in another. When humiliation turned to humility. When an ending became a beginning. When a torn check changed everything. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Remember that sometimes the most powerful changes in our lives come from moments that seem like failures. Share in the comments a time when something that seemed terrible turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.